Okay, so my clock says we're not quite at the top of the hour, but I'm so excited about this webinar that I'm just going to start it early rather than, I was that kid on Christmas who always had to open presents early. Welcome everybody, my name is Murph Krajewski. I am joined today by two absolute titans of the contact center industry who I will introduce shortly. First, just a couple of quick items of housekeeping. Number one, this webinar is being recorded and will be made available to everybody. Following the broadcast, we're going to follow this up with an email to you, so you don't have to worry about like where's that link again. We're going to send it to you in your inbox. We've also got some great asset that we can give away to you at the end of the webinar, so hang out for that if you're in a particularly if you're in a buying cycle for a contact center. We've got a resource that we think might really be helpful to you. Yeah, and so we're just going to go ahead and dive in. So I'm joined today by Sheila McGee-Smith, who is the president and principal analyst of McGee-Smith Analytics. If any of you have spent any amount of time in the contact center industry, you have heard Sheila's name, you have seen her writing, the research that she does. She's an anchor of many really important parts of the learning and researching process around contact centers and communications. So we're extremely happy that she's talking with us today. Also, directly to my right is Pam Hynes, the Chief Operating Officer of Sharpen, and she also has a long storied history in the contact center industry, from everything from a customer service worker all the way up through now in her role where she is shaping the future of the industry. So I'm privileged to work with her as well as have her on the webinar today, and that's my picture down at the bottom. I am your humble host, Murph Krajewski. So Sheila, I will welcome you in. I am going to get out of your way and let you conduct business with Pam from here on out. Sheila McGee-Smith, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Murph, and thank you for the very kind words. It was nice. I posted on LinkedIn and Twitter about this event today, and I was happy to say women in tech. It's nice to have another woman, Pam Hynes, who's another titan in the contact center market, to chat with for the next 30 minutes or so about cloud migration and lessons from the trenches. So 3 weeks ago in part 1 of this webinar series, we spoke to Ray Gallagher of HotSchedules, who has in the last year or so moved his contact center from a premises-based solution to a cloud-based solution with Sharpen. So we're going to start today's discussion by asking Pam, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Sharpen, to tell us a little bit about Sharpen to start us off.
Well, Sheila, first I want to thank you for joining us because I think this is a really important topic and I appreciate your assistance in getting the message out. Sharpen is a contact center solution that was actually born in the cloud. So in other words, unlike a number of other solutions, we didn't have to disrupt ourselves in order to provide our solution. Means there was no multi-year process of migrating to the cloud, but more importantly, no multi-year process of migrating customers to the cloud, which we know is not a good experience. We're in the public network, which means that reduces the time and expense around co-location and allows our growth to be much more elastic for our customers that choose our solution. But most importantly, Sharpen is a contact center solution with the agent experience in mind. We know that employees, including agents, if they are happier and more satisfied in their day-to-day jobs, they'll provide significantly better customer experience. And that's really what a contact center is all about. So that's a little bit about Sharpen, Sheila.
Excellent. So thank you. It was interesting when you talked about the elasticity of the cloud. And when it comes to migration, that's such an important point, right? We find that so many companies make that decision to move from premises to cloud when they find themselves in a situation where it's not elastic, where they have to grow or they have to add a new location, and suddenly they're back in the business of updating software or buying new servers. So that's a little bit about Sharpen. Obviously, we'll learn some more as we go along, but let's find out a little bit more about Pam and what she brings to the table, not just at Sharpen, but throughout her career.
Yeah, so it's kind of an interesting story, to be honest with you. After being educated, learning how to program large COBOL applications, I began my career in the contact center as a technical support engineer for a PC-based application for help desks. I then moved to a software company that was all about contact center solutions, and really the premise of that organization was, how do we disrupt large telephony hardware-based vendors so that contact centers would have more data or information at their fingertips about their customers as they're providing a service to them. Over the years at the contact center solution, we actually went from premise to a hosted to cloud deployments, and kind of disrupted ourselves in a number of different ways throughout that career. My 30 years have really been on the customer side of the solutions. I've always been interested in and working with what our customers are doing, what their experience is, but really what I found more intriguing is what's the experience they're trying to provide to their customers, and how can our solutions actually assist them in that.
So it's interesting. It's as if your career has somewhat mirrored the evolution of the marketplace. You know, you started out in a help desk company environment. Now you're at a state-of-the-art cloud company, and we're seeing both of those things, sort of help desk CRM type software, coming closer in the contact center space. So as those things are coming together, you can borrow from and depend on that history that you have from the past. It's a nice place to be.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely.
So you talked a little bit about being at a firm that disrupted itself several times, actually, a couple of times. So let's talk about that notion of migration to the cloud. What were the first steps? And then sort of let's talk a little bit about how it's different today.
Yeah, so probably about 10 to 12 years into the cycle was where I actually was asked to be kind of the driving force of moving our solution into the cloud through a hosted solution. There were all kinds of great advantages, you know, leveraging some of the shared platform and environment pieces, sharing standard operating procedures for day-to-day maintenance, and beginning to allow customers' IT organizations to be much more strategic and thinking about their business versus thinking tactically about how I keep a system up and running. But having said all that, it was still a single tenant environment, and there were a number of aspects that were still very much about managing individual clients, especially when you think about updates and upgrades and so forth. So yes, it was in the cloud, a lot of advantages, but still not quite hitting the mark.
So it's interesting. I had a conversation earlier this year with a global food manufacturer whose name will remain nameless, who took that path that you just described that your company took in their firm with their contact center. So they had, you know, the contact center solution premises-based from one of the historical leaders in the market. And about 4 years ago, they decided to move to the cloud. And so the vendor positioned and implemented for them what was a single tenant hosted cloud solution, right? And after 3 years, what the company found out was some of the advantages they got, as you described, but some of the advantages that they wanted, like true elasticity, like not still being tied to upgrade cycles, because that still happens sometimes in the single tenant mode. And so he made another change and moved away from one of those historical leaders to somebody who is more of an up-and-comer, not Sharpen, but another company similar to yours in some ways. So this notion of being in the cloud, it's something that companies who are looking to move from premises have to really look at where on the cloud journey is the vendor that they're speaking to. How do you differentiate one cloud vendor from another? Because everybody is using that terminology, but they're using it very differently. It's funny, one of the things that might sound good, it's the same software, we're putting it in the cloud, may not actually be the best answer, because software that was built for premises was built in a single tenant mode. I mean, you're more technical than I am, Pam, but to me, that's almost like a red flag when somebody says, oh, it's absolutely the same. Oh, then is it different enough? Will I get those advantages that I want? So that's a good segue to, what is present day migration to the cloud like?
Yep. So I think you bring up a number of really good points, but I think some of the important things to think about is that elastic scalability, is that it really does allow you to grow or reduce based off of what your business needs are without having to think about hardware or maintainability or buying new things or provisioning. You're essentially increasing the cost of your licenses. And that's a key aspect of being in the present day cloud. Also, there is an important thing that every customer needs to understand as they're looking out to move to the modern day cloud is cloud providers are going to continue, solution providers are going to continue to make changes to their product. They're going to continue to grow. It's important as the people that we are supporting and the needs of our customers continue to change and to grow. So as you're doing that as a customer, when I'm looking at or thinking about moving to the cloud, I need to make sure that I understand how does the vendor make their enhancements or changes. It's important that we are able to deliver those with toggles so that a customer doesn't have to actually make the change when the new feature or the new functionality or the change is available, but based off of their time schedule, based off of their customer journey. It's also really important because these things can happen so quickly and your IT staff's not involved in different changes, that the vendor is able to provide really great notes on what is changing. They need to be within the system, is where you can find in the solution, where you can find them. You don't have to go out to some website or do some different things of that nature. But most importantly, they need to be provided with the customer in mind and written with the customer in mind to understand what those are.
Yeah, go on, sorry.
No, that's fine. The other thing I want to make sure that customers are looking at is the solution providers really today are providing much more sophisticated tools that allow them to make operational changes to meet their ever-evolving needs. And that's important because as their business changes and they have to continue to provide service for their ever-changing needs of their customers, they need to make sure they understand how to make those changes, that it is in a mode and simple, and that they're enabled to be able to do that.
Right. So one of the things that I was going to add is that when we spoke to Ray Gallagher a few weeks ago, that was such a key benefit and something that he looked for as he worked with the vendors that he was looking at to replace his premises-based system. He wanted to be able to make changes on their own within the contact center organization without having to rely on IT resources. And we all know the reasons why. Because in IT, you're one of many parts of the business that require attention. And so your request, while crazy important to you, is just one of many things that the IT department has to do. And so that ability to do your own changes is such a big part of moving to a modern day cloud solution. It's also one of the things that global food manufacturer I talked about really saw he didn't have with his first tenant-based, single tenant cloud solution. Every time they wanted to do something as simple as change an IVR script, they had to do it through their vendor. So those are the kinds of things that become very clear when you look at the difference between a single tenant cloud and a truly modern day public cloud-based cloud solution.
Yep,
so let's move on and talk about why customers are choosing cloud. Why is that next generation, when people like HotSchedules, like that global food manufacturer, why are they moving to cloud?
So I think it boils down to me to 4 reasons that I've continuously heard. Probably the first and most important is the whole concept of security and compliance these days have driven cost up in the individual customer bases. If you're trying to make your premise-based system or even a hosted-based system as secure it needs to be, there's a significant cost. So leveraging a vendor that can do this across customers is so important to the buyers, and I hear that time and time again. Also, one of the things that we talked about earlier, the customers are realizing the ability to scale up and scale down just makes it so much easier for them as they're providing the service. With the tools, as we talked about, them being able to provide and be implemented in a much more timely manner. And that's not only for the initial implementation, but for ongoing things as they're changing their business. The tools are much better, more sophisticated, easier to access. And so that is a third reason. And then, and actually along that reason, I feel like I'm seeing as much that how important it is to make sure that to keep the implementation timeliness, that the customers have a defined customer journey. They know they're able to answer questions and ensure the compliance of their customer experience. The fourth reason, and I know if you just do cost of solution to cost of solution, you're probably not going to come back to this, but if you truly look at the cost of ownership of a modern day cloud solution, including all of your time and maintenance and so forth, but then also the opportunity cost to be able to respond to your customers in a timely manner, a cloud solution is much more cost effective.
And so I'm going to add one on my own. As an industry analyst, I study and look at all of the vendors in the contact center space, those who are in the premises and those in the cloud. And when I look at where solution providers are putting their investments, the investments are going into the cloud. Even companies that have thousands of customers on premises-based solutions and hundreds of thousands of agents, if not millions of agents, when we go to the meetings and we listen to what their roadmap is, it's either about moving to a new cloud solution or it's about how can we enable customers who are on a premises solution to get some advantage from the cloud. And it always seems to be a little difficult to do that and probably over time easier to just make the move. Kind of like the way the market moved, the CRM market moved to the cloud. And if you look at the CRM market, 80% of all customer relationship management licenses are held in the cloud. On the contact center side, we're somewhere between 15 and 20%. I think we're about to go through that shift that they saw over the last 7 years or so. We're about to see that now in the contact center space. So let's talk a little bit about how HotSchedules, what their migration was like, because you were part of that, and what some of the criteria they used as they chose among the, admittedly, many contact center as a service vendors that are out there. Pam?
Yeah, HotSchedules was actually great, and they were great to work with. They had a number of positive things, and some of the things that they talked about as they looked at making sure that they were working with a partner, understanding their business was key to them to make sure that as the implementation proceeded, that we were implementing as a partner and not just kind of throwing the software over the fence to allow them to do it themselves, but time to value was very critical for them. So it was how you approached it that I think was important to them. Having said that, and you mentioned this before, enablement was huge for them. They needed the flexibility to be able to do an integration to their own proprietary software, and having that ability, easily enabling them to be able to continue to make changes, not only to that integration, but just in general was very important to what they were doing.
Yeah, it was interesting when we spoke to Ray Gallagher. It was interesting how he talked about the partner versus vendor, because I think sometimes that can sound like a very pat kind of a statement. Oh, we're looking for a partner. We're not looking for a vendor. But what HotSchedules did was choose 2 vendors to go sort of head to head in proof of concept. And so they were able to watch how the vendors operated in a near real-time kind of a way during that proof of concept. And it was in that way that they decided finally to go with Sharpen, because they did feel like there was a partnership element that was missing from the other firm that had done the proof of concept.
Yeah, it was an exciting time for us.
So what was the process? Because as Chief Operating Officer, you don't just build that process for HotSchedules, you build it for every Sharpen implementation. So what is it like to go into a business that has a lot of servers and another solution running, and make sure that they don't drop calls as they go? What's the actual process that you used in HotSchedules, and then more generally?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, and one of the things that Ray commented on, is this is a project and needs a project plan that both teams are following and working through in order to get the implementation as tight and timely as possible. It's really is understanding the desired customer journey and the steps to achieve it, and what their desired outcomes are, so that the system can be implemented in a manner that hits those, because all vendors are going to do things differently. What's important is how are we doing that to make sure we achieve their goals. It was also very important, and our recommendation, to have an agent involved in the process. We believe, obviously, as the agent first contact center solution, that the agent's voice needs to be heard. They need to be champions, because no matter what you're doing, there is a natural reluctance to change. And so having them as part of the process makes so much sense to them. The plan also had, discussions on decommissioning and how they would move from one to the other, and make that seamless with, forwarding their number so that they had a backup plan if it was necessary. Although I think if you listened to Ray a few weeks ago, certainly wasn't necessary. So that was great. The organizational change plan by including the agents in place, the communications plan both to their customers, to their internal people, were all very important. But I think one of the things that Ray talked about and is important to us as we have our program to rolling out is, don't approach this as a boil the ocean. There's a lot of really great things that Sharpen can do for a customer, but this is already a big change. So let's step back and say, what specifically is needed to make sure that we're hitting our customer's journey to be successful? Do include some enhancements as to the reason why. There were some key decision factors in picking the new solution. So make sure that you have 1 or 2 of those that are included in that initial implementation to get some bigger wins and some bigger buy-in. And then have a roadmap defined for how you will take the solution to the next step, and what participation the vendor partner has in that, and what you'll be doing. Those are some of the key things that I think we saw HotSchedules do very well, and is our approach as we work through these implementations.
Yeah, it's an interesting balance that companies have to weigh, which is you certainly don't want to go in with the attitude that sometimes we've seen, I'm sure you've seen, of I just want it exactly the way it was before. I want you to replicate what we had. And that's never the right answer, right? But to your point, and to the point that Ray made from HotSchedules, you don't want to change too much either, right? So you wanted to create a new environment that's easier to work in, which it was, with some new tools for them. And then what we're going to talk about next is create that roadmap to think about what is next. What can we add to make this even better over time? So what has life been like in the cloud for HotSchedules as they've deployed this now? I think it's about 9 or 10 months ago.
Correct. It's about 9 months since they've been into production. So I think a couple of the pieces are that they've seen and that I've seen other customers is the business has so much more control, and they've already been able to make changes to affect what they want to do, utilizing the system and what their customer journey changes are. It's been so much easier for them to enable them. They have felt like it's been easier to be enabled, mainly because it's around actually using the system and not around maintenance of the system. We all know that there, when you're thinking about all of the steps to maintaining something, it's much more difficult. Really, we're enabling HotSchedules and all of our customers to, how do I change my call flow because I'm adding some new numbers, or because I'm bringing in another group that's going to assist with the service of our customers, or I've got additional data that I can look up and actually help our customers in the long run, or that I can incorporate bots to do some learning and be able to get the customer to the right person at the right time. There's all kinds of things that, now we're able to actually enable them for that versus teaching them just kind of some of the hardcore pieces. And then also, I think one of the things that we've talked about is the release and with toggles that the folks from HotSchedules are seeing as we have brought out some things specifically that they've requested for their business to operate more efficiently and effectively. And they've been able to see that they can turn it on when it was ready, when their team was ready for that, and yet they know about it and they understand it and they can see it from within the application. So those are some key things that I think that Ray and other Sharpen customers would say they've seen since life in the cloud.
Yeah, it's interesting when you think about being able to turn things on with toggles. It's so much more like, if I'm on my iPad and I get an update to Facebook and suddenly there's something there that I couldn't do before, smiley faces and happy faces and not just like anymore. That's great. And I didn't have to do anything. And I think it's the same kind of experience that your customers are having. Suddenly there's a new capability, a new way of being able to do something that was requested either by them, as you said, or by somebody else. And suddenly it's better. And that's what life is like in the cloud. Life is just better.
Absolutely.
What a great way to kind of wrap up that section of the conversation. So for those of you who are watching and listening along, this is a really rare and great opportunity. You've got access to both Sheila and to Pam for just a few more minutes. If you've got questions you want to answer enter into the questions panel there on your GoToMeeting app. Just while you're typing, some of the key takeaways to kind of remember here is I think Sheila kind of capped to this point really well, that running a contact center in the cloud is not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And so I think the environment that we're living in now makes that a lot more possible and a lot more accessible than it has been in the past. Pam mentioned that the agent is a more important stakeholder than ever in this process. Obviously, that's near and dear to us at Sharpen. We just believe that provides a really unique perspective. As everything else, this is a project and not a small one. So dedicate some project management resources to it, be an active participant in it, and make sure that you've got good goals and plans to achieve those goals, and be realistic about it. Don't boil the ocean from the start. Don't try to get to every last little benefit on the go live day. Allow yourself time to kind of get in there and settle and then move forward to the next phase. And then again, near and dear to Sharpen's heart, choose a partner, not a vendor. Look for somebody who is going to ask a lot of questions to discover your business goals, your values, and then tune their software to make sure to achieve those things. It's not a turnkey purchase. It's not a transaction. As we said, it's a large and ongoing project. So we're right around the bottom of the hour. I noticed not too many questions have come in, so I'm gonna just thank Sheila very much again for your involvement in our webinar today. Everybody who's been on, again, I mentioned we're gonna follow up with an email. We're going to send you a link to this asset if you'd like it. Of all of the hundreds of RFPs that we've been fielding, we've been seeing some commonalities and some trends. And we gathered that data together with some things that Ray Gallagher put together for their implementation. We distilled that into a template of an RFP. So if you're in the process of buying, or if you're engaged with somebody who's in the process of buying, this is just a generic resource that you can use to kind of help get that project going in a good, strong direction. Feel free to edit and adapt it as you need to. But again, a link to that will be in the email, along with a recording of this webinar. And I'm seeing that we're right at 2:30. So once again, Sheila, thank you so much for your involvement. Pam, thank you for your time, both of you for your insights. Yeah, I think it's been a really great conversation. I'm going to wrap us up here and thank all of our attendees for joining. Have a great day, everyone.